Hey guys, it's Van Diazzo by Carpe Vanguard deck profile. So if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and subscribe. This time we are covering DZ set 11 for Krysrain Cadenza. Cadenza basically is the new form of Krysrain, which has her original skills but upgraded them to actually be a hell of a lot better than it was before. And honestly, if you asked me that if I thought I was going to make a Krysrain deck in set 11 or recently at all, I would have told you that you're crazy. And now that Krysrain Cadenza exists, yeah, I'm starting to see the realisticness of it. So let's get the start items we got, because honestly, I used to hate Krysrain upon debut. Set 4, I didn't hate her a lot. I think I actually liked Krysrain in set 4, but I didn't really play her after set 4. And then after she got all her new upgrades and stuff, I actually played her kind of consistently. So let's get this started, shall we? First up, we have our energy generator. So it's our ride deck crest, auto ride deck. When you ride, put this card to your crest zone. If you win second energy, charge 3. Continuous amount of 10 energy, auto begin your ride phase, energy charge 3. Then act once per turn, you energy blast 7, draw a card. On pretty solid, you get a free 3 energy every turn. If you win second, you get an extra 3 on top of it. And you can blast 7 energy to draw a card. What I really love about Krysrain is that she's one of the few grade 3s that actually energy charges you instead of energy blast for you, meaning there are more often times than not where you actually use that energy blast up to draw a card. Granted, we have really good rear guards that do cost 3 energy for those skills, so more often than not you won't use the draw skill, but you do have plenty of ways you draw in the deck, and again, if you don't draw any of those, Krysrain will more likely than not make it so that you can use the energy generator to draw. Our starter is Wonder Lavender Your Soul. Grades will boost 5k shield, 6k base, auto remote upon you for a second draw card. It's the standard starter, nothing too special about it, it's just a free draw if you go second. You can make this any starter you want, none of the random requires Your Soul, I just make it Your Soul because it's Krysrain's canonical starter. As for our triggers, we start off with our over trigger Mysterious Twins Romia and Rumia. Grades will boost 50k shield, 5k power. Over trigger, you remember trigger in your deck. You reveal it as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one to give plus 1 million for the turn. And you reveal it during your jet check, activate the addition effect, which you get the player during this fight, you get during your turn. All your rear guards get 10,000 power. That's pretty cool because Krysrain can consistently pump out a full board of rear guards, so being able to basically give 20k to your rear guard columns and then 10k to your vanguard column is really good. Technically, if you know your luck with your over trigger, like you know you're always going to sack out at a specific point because either you built a very specific Krysrain deck to pull that off, or you just know your luck really well. You could make this Isfario for the guaranteed divine skill kill, but I prefer Romia and Rumia just because if you don't hit her during the divine skill turn, but you hit her any other point, you're getting a lot of numbers to your board. Then we have our normal triggers, 3 Cheerful Sunshine Walls, grades will boost 15k show, 5k base. Make this any crit you want. I just chose to make it Wallace because why not? It's the vanilla crit. And then we have 4 Precious Tune Edwidge, grades will boost 15k show, 4k power. Trigger auto rear guard. At the end of the battle that she boosted, put this unit to soul to choose one units, give it plus 2k to end of turn. So, you know, someone gets 2k, that doesn't really make a difference, but she does go to soul, and in the match that unfortunately will not be up by the time this deck profile goes up, but will hopefully go up within the next 2 weeks, yeah, soul became kind of a big problem in the deck, and that's not to say that this build has a soul problem. It doesn't, if you remember one very specific flaw in the Krysrain's new skill, which is okay. Just make sure that you are aware of how much soul you have, and Edwidge can help mitigate that if you completely forget that your grade 3 costs soul for her skill. Then we have our 4 draw triggers in Transparent Snow Knight Bear Toy. Grades will boost 5k shield, 4k base. Contains guard circle. Every opponent's vanguards are grade 3 or greater at 5,000 to her shield. So she's a 10k shield and a draw trigger, so she helps add cards to your hand. And then we have our 4 heal and talkative Our Tamus. Grades will boost 15k shield, 5k base. Make this any heal you want. You can even make it the counter heals, but I prefer the normal vanilla heals because they have a consistent 15k shield. Starting off with our grade 1s, we have our 4 PGs. So I recommend you have 1 copy of each PG because, I mean, the deck can kind of pull them out of deck, and then not to mention the fact that Krysrain has the ability to bounce them, and having different card names on board is really helpful for Krysrain. So we have 1 copy of Diva of Refreshing Calm Christine, 1 copy of Soapy Splash Ravinia, 1 copy of Musical Committee Nicoline, and 1 copy of Best Sword Top Warmia. Technically, you don't need 4 different PGs. You could afford to run all 4 copies of the same PG. I don't think anything bad would come of that. I just recommend it just for consistency's sake. So all of them have the exact same stats and skill. Grade 1 boost, 0 soaks, 6k base, continuous central, 4 centrals, and deck. And autos upon guard circle, choose one mutes. It cannot be hit in the battle if your hands 2 more cards in. Choose a card from your hand and discard it. Standard PG, nothing too special about it. Basically means if this and one of card is in your hand plus 1 guard circle, you don't have to discard. It's great because that means you be super aggressive in the early game. Basically spam down all your other grade 1s and grade 2s, and then when your opponent does eventually counterattack you, throw down one of your 4 PGs, give them the middle finger, you're good to go. Very solid cards to have in the deck, and again, you can run any PGs really from Lyrical Monasterio because pretty much Lyrical Monasterio has a bunch of different PGs per their different archetypes, and they all share the exact same skills, so you can really run any of them, and they'll pretty much have the same effect as these ones. As for our grade 1s that aren't PGs, we run 2 copies of Precious Posing Alvidandina. Grade 1 boost 5k shield, 8k base, auto rear guard when she boosts. If you use the divine skill of your grade 3, get advantage on Krysrain in this fight. During this fight, she gets 10,000 power for the battle. So to be very specific, she has to use the divine skill of Krysrain and not the divine skill of someone else while you're on Krysrain. I specify that because I feel like there is someone who would try to run Lisa Field as the main grade 3, at least the grade 3 of the ride deck, and then ride to Krysrain after. And well, you wouldn't be able to do that because if you use Lisa Field's divine skill, you wouldn't be able to use Krysrain's divine skill, which means you wouldn't be able to make this thing an 18k booster. Being able to be an 18k booster after have to use the Divine Skill is pretty solid. The thing is though, Krysrain's Divine Skill has become a lot more tactical now with its really good upgrade, so there are times where you might not need to use the Divine Skill, so her 18k is no longer, at least for me, is no longer the second I can use the Divine Skill, I fire it off. So not a bad grade one though, but like not a grade one you want to see too many of, so that's why she's nice as a 2 of. Then we have 3 copies of Snowflake of the Deep Sea Ephemer. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. She's one of my favorite cards in terms of arts, and I don't know why. Auto rearguard once per turn. When your other rearguards return to your hand during your turn, if your vanguard's a grade 3 or greater mermaid, which Krysrain is, choose one of your units and give it 5k for the turn, and then auto when this unit is returned to your hand from the rearguard circle, if your vanguard's a grade 3 or greater Krysrain, yeet a different card from your hand into your soul to draw a card. All are pretty solid because, you know, someone being placed at any point, she'll be a 13k base, which is pretty solid once you hit a grade 3, and then once she's bounced back to hand via Krysrain's ability or someone else's ability, which can proc at the end of the turn thanks to Krysrain's ability or her Divine Skill, you can put a different hand card to soul. That way you're getting your soul back up for Krysrain's Divine Skill or any of your other soul blasters, and you're also getting to increase your hand to replace the card. Not a bad grade 1 at all. Again, you do want to have different card names in your deck, but she is a very solid card to have, which is why we have her at 3 copies. And then we have 4 copies of Cynical Composer Rom. I feel like every other set that I played this card in, I learned how to use it better. Like set 1, I sucked with it in. Set 2, for some reason, I excelled with it in. And this set, I barely can use it properly, so hopefully if Krysrain gets another set of support, I can use Rom properly then. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, continues rearguard circle. During the battle that she boosted anything, your vanguards are grade 3 or greater Krysrain, she'll get 5,000 power, so 13k booster. And then auto rearguard, when she boosts specifically a grade 3 or greater Krysrain vanguard, if you have 4 more different card names upon your units, so herself included and also Krysrain herself, so that's 2 cards. All you need is 2 other rearguards with different card names. You can Energy Blast 3 until end of battle. When your opponent will call cards from their hand to guard circle that aren't sentinels, they must call 3 or more with different grades at the same time. So if your opponent doesn't have a PG, or your opponent's saving the PG for maybe the thing that's going to be called from Krysrain's Divine Skill, they're going to have to drop 3 cards on the Vanguard unless they have a Blitz order PG in the form of Sanctitude. Either way, very solid grade 1 to have because it basically throws out a lot of cards from your opponent's hand. So very solid grade 1 to have. Worst case scenario, she boosts Krysrain to a 26k without any other effects applied to it. And best case scenario, she guard restricts your opponent. So 4 of. Then we have 4 copies of Moderate Mint Rochelle. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. A card who, just like Rom, every other set I can use properly. So the set she debuted in, which was set 4, I actually used her properly. Set, technically this one, I completely forget how to use her skill properly with Rom because they both cost energy blast of 3. And she has a beautiful sunrise in the background. So hopefully, again, this deck gets more support and I can use her properly because she's one of my favorite cards. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto rearguard, when you're grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Krysrain's card name attacks, energy blast 3, yeet her to soul to draw a card. Then if your rearguard has not stood by a card ability this turn, choose a rearguard that was chosen by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Krysrain in the card name and stay in the unit. No matter what, you get a free soul charge and a draw for energy blast 3. So I mean, you know, not bad, but then you possibly also get a rearguard restand. The only downside to that restand is that you have to have picked a rearguard from Krysrain's skill. Now, thankfully, the new Krysrain picks 2 rearguards from its skill instead of 1 like the original. The original one only picked 1 rearguard or picked 1 unit, so it could have been Krysrain herself, but you could pick 1 rearguard to give plus 15k. The new Krysrain still does that, but now she has a separate ability that allows you to pick a different rearguard, which means you have 2 different targets for restand, which is honestly pretty solid. And in that on-camera game, I completely forgot about that on the final turn when I didn't have soul, which means I was going to whiff Krysrain's Divine Skill if I didn't get really lucky. Yeah, I'm spoiling that game, but I literally just recorded that game last night, and it's really in my head about how I really got lucky about that win because I should not have won considering how bad that final turn was. Like, I made so many misplays. 4 of Rochelle, very solid grade 1. She goes to soul and replaces herself with a free hand card, and then not to mention the fact that she can possibly get you multi-attack, and she can do it all while your opponent's at grade 2, so you can bully down your opponent's grade 2 Vanguard, and thanks to Krysrain's new Divine Skill, you can get 5 attacks consistently against your opponent. So 4 of Rochelle. Then we have our last grade 1 in the deck, one of in the red deck, none in the main deck of Lively Navy Tiffany. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto input Rotopon by Confident Aqua Musette. Reveal the top card of your deck, call to rearguard surface a grade 2 as a normal unit, and play it to your hand if it's not. So AK, if it's a Krysrain, add it to hand. If it's an order card, add it to hand. If it's a trigger, add it to hand. If it's anything else, you call it to rearguard, which means it sucks that you might have to call PG from that, but on the bright side, going into your grade 3 turn, unless your opponent marks that PG before you get a chance to bounce it, you can bounce it back to your hand. So one of Tiffany, not a bad grade 1 to have in the deck, and the new Krysrain definitely benefits from having to call PG. On to our grade 2s, 2 copies of Innocent Orange Anna's, grade 2 and 5k shield, 10k base. She's a very hefty cost for a Krysrain card, but her skill is really good to the point where she's at least worthy of a 2 of spot. So auto place on rearguard circle. If your Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater Krysrain, CB1 and Energy Blast 3 to check the top 5. Choose up to 1 unit card from among them with a different card name from the unit cards on both your Vanguard circle and your rearguard. Call to rearguard, shuffle your deck. So this is the only card that can actually pull a PG from your deck. So if you know you can't kill your opponent this turn, and you know your opponent can kill you next turn if you don't have a PG, then you play Anna's and you see a PG in your top 5, well, you can call that PG and then use Krysrain's skill to bounce that PG back to your hand. And then auto rearguard, when she attacks a grade 3 or greater unit, unit if you have 4 more units with different card names, including herself in the Vanguard. So just like Rom is already 2 units, you just need 2 more units and you automatically get the plus 10k for the battle. Very solid grade 2. She's a 20k swing without boosters once she hits a grade 3 or greater. Not to mention the fact that she can call anything from the top 5 as long as it has a different name than something on your board, which most of the times it will be, meaning she can help create your board from nothing, especially if you call her before you call anything else. And then not to mention the fact that she could also get you PGs, which could help you survive your opponent's next turn. So to be honest, her cost is really heavy for a deck that has a lot of energy blasters and cards that really need their CB, like Krysrain, but she is a very solid card for making sure that you can live but also start combos, so 2 of. And then we have 3 copies of Loving Pink Francette, great turn set 5k shield, 10k base, another really good support card for Krysrain in the rear guard. Most of the time you want to target via Krysrain's own ability. Auto rear guard, when this unit is chosen by the effect of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard, Krysrain in the card name, choose one Vanguards and it gets 10,000 power for the turn. The point is you're supposed to give Krysrain's 15k to Francette, making her a 25k, and then Francette, because she was chosen by Krysrain's ability, gives Krysrain plus 10k, making Krysrain a 23k, which means you have a 25k rear guard who could withstand thanks to the ability of Rochelle over here. So very solid grade 2 there. And then auto rear guard, when this unit attacks anything, if you have 3 or more units with different card names, again, herself and Krysrain is already 2, so you need 1 more rear guard and you automatically got it. This unit gets 5,000 power for the turn. Then if you have 4 more units with different card names, so just 1 more rear guard from the 5k, and at the end of the battle, choose one of your other rear guards and bounce it back to your hand. That is an amazing non-once per turn skill, because if you pull it off, because you can do it in the same turn, you could end up using Rochelle to stand for a set and bounce rear guards twice. That's pretty good, which means you can be super aggressive on your opponent, and then let's say for example they're playing something like Atrasaria, you bounce your entire board and then they can't really lock anything, or if they do, they lock something from the back row if you play it right. Honestly, Francette is an amazing grade 2. She gives Krysrain numbers after being chosen by Krysrain's own power-up effect, or even just the bounce effect would be enough to actually trigger the ability now. Not to mention the fact that on swing she's a 15k base almost inherently, and then she also gets the ability to bounce other rear guards back to your hand, including PGs. This card's amazing, and I don't remember what its real price is in real life, but whatever it is, it's definitely worth it if it's over $10, because this card is amazing. So 3 of. Then we have 3 copies of Morning Practice in the Calm Seas Tomarna, grade 2 intercept 5k shield, 10k base, auto when placed on rear guard circle. If your Vanguards are grade 3 or greater Krysrain, soul blast 2 cards of different card names. Search your deck for up to 1 grade 1 card without Sentinel, reveal it, and if you do not have a copy of it on your board, call it to rear guard circle, and the called unit gets 5,000 power to end of turn, then you shuffle. So cool. This basically most of the time pulls you whatever you need from your deck. Again, it can't pull your PG, but it can pull Alvina if you need a really good booster or just different card names. Ideally, you want something like F-Mir to get hand cards, or Rom to pressure out your opponent, or Rochelle for restand. Most of the time it's either Rom or Rochelle, but if you have like both of them already, then you know, maybe F-Mir. It just depends on what you need in the situation, but being able to pull any grade 1 from your deck is awesome. And then auto rear guard, when this unit attacks anything, if your Vanguards are grade 3 guard to Krysrain, and your opponent's Vanguard's also grade 3 guard, she gets 5,000 power for the battle. So 15k swing, not the best power-up skill, especially like when we just went over something like Francette, but she's still a very great grade 2 for, again, pulling any grade 1 out from your deck and still being a 15k swing as long as your Vanguards are Krysrain into a grade 3 or greater. So it's a very solid 3 of. The only downside is she eats up 2 soul, but again, as long as you are smart about your soul count, because you only really need to worry about Krysrain's soul blast skill once per game because of the divine skill effect. As long as you're smart about it, you can get away with it. So 3 of Tromana. And also we have ways to soul charge as well in the form of 3 copies of Emphatic Lime Armel, grade 2 instead 5k shield, 10k base, all in place on rear guard circle. You may soul charge 1. Okay, this is the last time I'm going to bring up that game, but that game, that final turn, I had the ability to soul charge, and I wouldn't have been in a bad situation where I couldn't use Krysrain's skill, because if I did soul charge, I would have been able to use Krysrain's skill, but I completely forgot that Krysrain's skill required a soul blast. So yeah, I misplayed, but I had the ability to not misplay, and I just didn't know. Anyway, so you may soul charge most, not a mandatory soul charge, so if you're afraid of decking out, you don't have to, or if you're me in that situation and you're afraid of seeing triggers in that soul charge, you don't have to. If you have a grade 3 grade Vanguard Krysrain in the card name, you can then choose one of your units. It can be her, it can be Krysrain, it can be anyone else. It gets 5,000 power for the turn. Then by counterblasting 1, you draw a card, and this unit gets 5,000 power for the turn. So pretty solid. So you get a free soul charge anytime that you play her, whether you play her before you get to grade 3 or after you get to grade 3. But then if you played her while you're on grade 3, someone gets 5k, then you can CB1 to get a draw and then give her 5k. So pretty solid ability there. And then act rear guard once per turn. If your Vanguard's a grade 3 guard to Krysrain in its card name and you put it in order this turn, literally the only reason this card's in this deck, you can energy blast 3, choose a grade 1 card that's Sentinel from your drop zone, and if you do not have a copy of it on your board, call it to rear guard circle. I genuinely do wonder why this card requires you to play an order. I mean, yes, this order is kind of made tailored for Krysrain, but I feel like it's arguably more tailored made for Lysafil in my opinion. But either way, it's tailor made for both of them, but I don't know why it specifically is requiring Krysrain to run it when Krysrain runs no other orders. Either way, being able to superior call overall, any grade 1 without Sentinel, again, from the drop zone is solid because it's your way to recycle your ROMs if you barely survived your opponent's last turn. Rochelle, if you Soul Blasted her off of Tomana, which is a really cool play that you can do to basically get board presence in 2 different rear guards, or, you know, your Amphiria, in case that left the board from a Soul Blast. She gets you Soul Charge by being placed. She gets good numbers to both herself and other units as well in a possible draw. And she also gets you rear guard cycling for only 3 EB, which you get every turn from both your Energy Generator and Krysrain, so solid 3 of. Then we have our order card, 3 copies of High 5. Grade 2 normal order, it can be played from the drop zone and play it by counterbossing 1. However, if your Vanguard just has Divine Skill, not having to have used the Divine Skill, so that's good, you can play this card for free. So once you're on Krysrain, for free, find this card, draw a card, choose a card from your hand and reveal it. If you revealed a unit card with greater less than equal to your Vanguard, you always will call it to rearguard circle if it is, and if it's not, discard it. And if you called a card to rearguard circle, and your Vanguard is also grade 3 or greater, to end of turn, the called unit gets auto when it leaves the rearguard circle, choose unit, give it 5k for the turn, and it also gets 5,000 power itself. So if you play this before you get to grade 3, it's just a CB1, draw a card, get a rearguard. Cool. If you play this after you get to grade 3, well, it's a draw, rearguard, give that rearguard 5k, and then when it leaves the board, give someone else 5k, and it leaves the board by any means. So Rochelle going to Soul, for example, would count towards that. Anything bounced by Krysrain's Divine Skill, which then you could give Krysrain the 5k, and then Krysrain would end up giving more power to whatever she superior calls because she got an extra 5k. R on High 5 is a really good order that works for Krysrain. Again, I question why Krysrain's name support card requires basically a promo that's tailor-made for her, kind of, to be played, but whatever. Still a very solid card to have in the deck. 3 up. I also love how it's 2 idols, and there are only 2 Lyrical Monasterio cards that have Divine Skill, so who knows, maybe it's supposed to represent Krysrain and Lisa Phil. I mean, the Destined one's color was red, and the Fated one's color was blue, just saying, it's a possibility. Then we have our last grade 2 in the deck, one of the red deck and then the main deck of Confident Aqua Musette. Grade 2 instead 5k shield, 10k base, auto and voted upon by a grade 3 card Krysrain in the card name, reveal the top card of your deck, call to rear guard so if it's a grade 3 as norm unit, put it to your hand if it's not. I don't hate this ability as much as I do now than I used to, because when I used to hate it, I had a valid reason, because the old Krysrain could only bounce things via Divine Skill, so you had to run other generic cards like Eureka, who we all know is expensive as all hell, to bounce rear guards, meaning that there was a chance that this thing could flip a Persona Ride, and you wouldn't be able to add the Persona Ride back to your hand unless you had one of those generic cards or use Krysrain's Divine Skill. In this case, you still have the chance to hit the Persona Ride, however, Cadenza can at least bounce it back to your hand on her own, meaning it's not the end of the world. And again, like the grade 1, she only calls things that are normal units, so if you end up calling like a PG, again, you can bounce it, but if you end up saying a trigger, it goes to hand anyway. So not a bad grade 2, it gets you either a free rear guard or a free hand card, and while there are some things you would rather not hit off her skill, at least Krysrain Cadenza can bounce them back to hand, so one of Musette. And as speaking of Krysrain Cadenza, we move on to our last card of the deck, even the main deck, and one of in the ride deck of the most random reveal for a supporting grade 3 I've ever seen, because they did not announce this till the week before. Fated one of ever-changing Krysrain Cadenza, grade 3 twin drive, Persona 13k base, 2 skills. Both of the skills are pretty much direct upgrades of the original Krysrain. So active Vanguard once per turn, CB1, choose any number of units and perform all the following. If you chose 4 or more and all the chosen units have different card names, perform 2 instead of 1. If you chose 5 or more units and all the chosen units have different card names, perform all instead of 1. The first 3 skills are the exact same verbatim as the old Krysrain. Draw a card, energy charge 3, choose a unit, give it plus 15k for the turn, whether it's her or a rear guard, and then this unit gets plus 1 critical for the turn. So those first 3 are the exact same as the original Krysrain. The new skill is choose one of your rear guards and it gets auto rear guard. At the end of your turn, you may return this unit to your hand till end of turn. So cool, it's not a mandatory return to hand, so if you want to keep it on your board, you can, but if it's like, say for example, you call Persona Alpha Musette, you can bounce it back to your hand. If maybe you have called a PG via some of your skills, you can add the PG back to your hand, or Emiphir to get you an extra soul card, or like just a generic grade 1 to bounce back for 5k shield, or if your opponent's playing something like Artisaria and you're going to lock your board, or you know they're going to retire your important units, you bounce them back to your hand before your opponent can do anything with them. All around, Krysrain has like a very cool versatility now thanks to that bounce skill, because it's not mandatory if you don't want to use it. If you do want to use it, it allows you to get any card back to your hand, and it works on triggers as well. And then finally, the Divine Skill, Auto Vanguard, at the end of the battle, that she attacked a grade 3 or greater unit, so the same thing as the original Krysrain. However, instead of it being free now, it's Soul Blast 1. In exchange, you can choose any number of rear guards instead of all of your rear guards, return them to your hand, then choose up to 1 card from your hand, unit card from your hand, call it to rear guard circle, and to end of turn, increase or decrease that unit's power and critical to match this unit. So most of the Divine Skill is the same. You bounce rear guards to the hand, and then you call something, and that unit's power and critical will match Krysrain's. However, it gets any additional boosters as well. Say, for example, you flip the over, that rear guard also gets additional 10k. If it's something like Anez, on attack it gets plus 10, stuff like that. However, now, Krysrain doesn't automatically bounce everyone, which means Anez's ability used to not proc off unless you got really lucky with Anez's top 5 hit. Now she bounces any rear guards that you want, meaning you can choose to keep some on board to do that Francette combo I was talking about, or just to guarantee that Anez will be a plus 10k on swing annoying, and not to mention the fact that it only costs a Soul Blast. So again, not bad, just have to make sure that you are aware of that Soul Blast cost, because I completely forgot about it during my game. Either way though, very solid, great to have. While her skill is almost the exact same as the original Krysrain, those two small updates make such a huge difference because it turns the deck into such a bigger consistency beat stick. And that's it for this one. I hope all of you guys enjoyed. Honestly, this deck is very fun to play. I used to not like Krysrain back in set 1 because, I don't know, it just felt weird having like all the different card names, and it felt like the Divine Skill was the only like shining moment for the deck, and you'd only have that for one turn. But now she can hit really good numbers consistently. She has consistent bouncing to your rear guard circles, and you have so many different ways to play the deck between offense and defense that this deck does so well even without really broken generic cards such as Yuika, who cost a lot of money. So all around, this deck is very fun to play, and if you want to pick it up, I definitely recommend trying it out. So I'm gonna just want to hear. I hope all of you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord, follow Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to send up your Vanguards.